Hello again. In this video I'll case swap this HP 110 PC into a Mini-ITX case. I'll also be adding Wi-Fi capability to it and installing an SSD. So a while back I acquired this thing from Facebook Marketplace for next to nothing, and originally it had Windows 8 and an HDD as a boot drive, and I've already taken that HDD out and used it as a secondary storage drive in another PC. Although this looks like pretty much a standard ATX PC, you can notice that there's no PSU or PCIe slot covers where they should be, and after opening the side panel you'll learn why that is. So yeah, as you can see here, there's what looks like a standard Mini-ITX motherboard. Spoiler alert, it's non-standard, and it's in a case that looks like it was originally meant to have a MITX motherboard inside. So maybe HP just used a case that was originally meant for another PC, and now we have this weird looking thing where it's mostly empty. Well, I have another HP motherboard that's M-ATX that I want to move into this case. And this almost Mini-ITX motherboard I want to move into a Mini-ITX case so that I can benefit from the smaller form factor. So these two cables here are the SATA power cables for the HDD and for the optical drive, and the power goes from the external power supply through the MOBO to these devices. This connector is for the front USB ports. HP has made sure to make it non-standard in order to bully its customers some more, but it looks like it just has two additional ground pins, so that's probably not an issue. This is for the front panel SD card reader. It looks like it's just a standard single USB connection. This yellow cable is for the front panel audio, and it looks like it's a standard one. And yeah, from the amount of dust it's collected, it seems that this PC really has been in use for some time. In this corner of the motherboard you can see the F panel connector, and it looks like it's a standard connector for the power button and for the LEDs. In addition to these parts, we also need to pop out the I/O shield from the PC, which seems to be standard. So here we have the ITX case that I want to mount this motherboard in. As you can see, this is a very simple metallic box. It has double front panel USB 2 connectors, it has a power button and power LED, and it has support for a 2.5-inch drive. I bought this a while ago and it looks like that listing is no longer up, but I found what looks like to be the same model. I'll link that in the description. Mine arrived with 4 rubber feet. I guess you can decide if this will sit horizontally or vertically, or I guess you could mount this on the back of a display. It has 4 mounting holes on the bottom there, and according to the seller that has something to do with some type of a VESA standard, though I've never seen this standard. After taking out the 2.5-inch drive holder bracket and inserting the I/O shield, it was time for me to realize that expecting HP to make a standard size ITX MOBO was very dumb. Yeah, of course the motherboard is too wide by just a couple of millimeters from one side. So now that I knew that everything wouldn't be quite so plug and play, I wanted to test the PC outside of the case to see that everything works before I start investing time to try and fit this MOBO inside the case. And yeah, at least in Xubuntu it ran without any issues. So yeah, somehow I'll have to make this work. So first issue is this rivet in the corner that is in the way. If I bend the board from the corner a little bit, I can get the board under that rivet. But the second issue is a bit more tricky. I don't want to take out a slice of the board with a Dremel or something. There's probably something important in that part of the board, so the board will just have to sit a bit offset from its supports. Now it'll only be offset by a couple of millimeters, and I checked from the underside of the board that there's nothing that would short out. And since the PCB's edge will be right against this part of the case, I put some tape there. I don't know if it's necessary, but just to be sure. And since the board will be a bit offset from its supports, we'll need to make a few modifications to the I/O shield to make sure that it lines up with the motherboard. So basically what I did was I stretched the I/O shield from one side and shortened it from the other. And now the ports line up again. Now that that problem is dealt with, I need to figure out something else to hold the board in place, since I cannot use the supports since they are offset from the motherboard. And looking inside the original case, there's this rubber block that was supposed to be some kind of a support for the motherboard, I guess. Well, that seems to be almost perfect size for this purpose, but it's not quite. Well, I cut that into two pieces and put a bit of adhesive in them, and one of these sides seems to go almost perfectly in this gap here, and the other half of it will secure the motherboard in place on this side. Now it's actually quite well mounted there. It doesn't move towards any of the sides, but I still want to figure out a way to prevent it from moving upwards. But while I think of a solution, I can complete the assembly of the PC and test it when it's assembled into the case. I plugged in the USB 2.0 front panel connector, ignoring the two extra pins that HP put there, and plugged in also the power and LED connectors. And after that I took out the two screws holding the front panel in place, since that's where I want to install the Wi-Fi antennas. The Wi-Fi itself will be a Mini-PCIe one from a broken laptop, and I have some antennas for the Wi-Fi here. Of course you can get this from AliExpress or eBay, but before ordering new ones you can check if you have a pile of broken laptops or something. Statistically, if you're watching this video, that's quite likely. And older laptops almost always have this kind of antenna. I've noticed that the antennas work best when they're attached to something non-conductive like this plastic front panel here. And this way you also get the antennas outside of the metallic case. After some cable management, I mounted a 240 gig SSD onto the 2.5-inch drive bracket and connected its data and power cables to the motherboard. The first idea I had to hold down the motherboard was to install this break-off PCIe slot piece between the SSD and the 2.5-inch bracket, which would then press down on the CPU cooler. I thought that would be a good idea because the CPU cooler is in the middle of the motherboard, and this way I only would need this one thing to hold it down, but I realized that it's probably a bad idea to have anything applying pressure on the CPU cooler. That will cause the CPU cooler to lean towards one side, which will mean it will not sit flush with the CPU die itself. I'll get back to how I solved that problem in the end, but let's next talk about the fans. So the PC is quite picky about the fans, and it'll give an error message at startup if it detects that there's no CPU or chassis fan. Sometimes it even gives an error if you change the fan for a different one. I still wanted to replace the original CPU fan because it was being quite noisy, and I installed a bigger fan which I ended up mounting here on the side panel. I had to experiment with some different fans and using different fan speed reducers to finally get the PC to accept the fan without giving any error messages. And as you can see, inside the PC is another fan as a top exhaust fan, which is actually the original CPU fan, but now it's connected via a fan speed reducer, so it's not noisy anymore. Both of the fans are connected to the case with rubber grommets. One adjustment I had to make was separate the fan more from the side panel. This will result in much quieter fan. I also cleaned off old thermal paste and applied new paste. And this is the solution I came up with to keep the motherboard secure down. So as you can see, it's mounted from two opposing corners, which should be enough. And here we have the PC running, and it's running Windows 11, although it's not officially supported. Thanks to Rufus, it was very easy to install. Even the Wi-Fi is working out of the box with the antennas providing good connectivity. Comparing to my recent Phenom 2X6 build, that's quite a difference in size. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the old case is not going to waste. It now has an HP M-ATX motherboard inside as well as an internal PSU. So here are both of these builds running side by side, and as you can see both are running Windows 11 and I am still running Prime 95 on the Mini-ITX one to test that the cooling actually works. And as you can see, since it's been staying under 73 degrees under the maximum load, I would say that it works.